If you believe that honesty is the foundation of every marriage, then what happened on Family Feud will either restore your faith or break your heart. When Marcus Thompson stepped onto that stage with his wife and family, he thought his secret was safe. He had been lying to his wife for over 2 years about something that would shake any marriage to its core. But Steve Harvey, a man who has seen just about everything in his decades on television, saw right through him. And what Steve did next left the entire studio audience stunned into complete silence. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel right now. Turn on that notification bell so you never miss stories like this one. Trust us, you are going to want to share this with everyone you know. Now let us get into it. There was a time when a man's word meant everything. When a handshake was a contract and looking someone in the eye meant you were telling the truth. But what Marcus Thompson did to his wife Denise on national television proved that sometimes the people closest to us are the ones hiding the biggest lies. And sometimes, it takes a stranger on a game show stage to finally bring the truth into the light. What started as a fun family outing to a television studio turned into a moment of reckoning that would change 2 lives forever. Marcus Thompson was 41 years old. He was a big man with a warm smile, the kind of guy who walked into a room and made everyone feel comfortable. He had a deep laugh that echoed through the studio the moment he stepped on stage. Standing next to him was his wife, Denise, 39 years old, a woman who radiated kindness and strength in equal measure. She wore a bright yellow dress that matched her personality, always the sunshine in every room. Together they had been married for 14 years, and they were raising 3 beautiful children in a modest home just outside of Atlanta, Georgia. To anyone looking at them from the outside, they were the picture of a happy American family. Denise worked as a school nurse at Riverside Elementary. Every single day, she showed up for other people's children, bandaging scraped knees, checking temperatures, calming down anxious kids who just wanted to go home, and calling parents when fevers spiked. She had chosen that career because she believed in taking care of people. It was in her nature, woven into the fabric of who she was. Her mother had been a nurse too, working double shifts at Grady Memorial Hospital for 30 years to provide for their family. Denise had grown up watching her mother sacrifice sleep, holidays, and personal time so that her children could have a better life. That example shaped everything Denise became. She often told her own children that the greatest thing a person could do was show up for someone else when they needed it most. Marcus, on the other hand, had told everyone, Denise included, that he worked as a regional sales manager for a large medical supply company called Medline Partners. It was a respectable job. Good salary, company car, travel opportunities, benefits. For 2 years, he left the house every morning at 7:30 in a pressed shirt and tie, kissed Denise goodbye at the front door, and drove off to what she believed was a successful career. He talked about clients and conference calls at the dinner table. He complained about his boss named Gary who never appreciated the sales team. He even brought home a bonus check at Christmas that made Denise cry with gratitude because it meant they could finally fix the leaking roof that had been dripping into their daughter's bedroom for months. But Marcus was not a regional sales manager. He had not been one for over 2 years. He had been fired from that position during a company restructuring, and the truth about what he had been doing every day since then was something that would test the very foundation of their marriage. The shame of losing his job had been so overwhelming that Marcus made a decision in the parking lot the day he was let go. He decided that no one would ever know. Not his wife, not his children, not his mother. Nobody. The Thompson family had been selected for Family Feud after Denise's younger sister, Tamika, submitted an application as a birthday surprise. Denise was absolutely thrilled when they got the call. She loved Steve Harvey and watched the show every single evening while folding laundry after the kids went to bed. She would shout answers at the television and laugh at Steve's reactions. It was her favorite part of the day. Marcus, on the other hand, was nervous from the moment they got the news. Being on national television meant being seen by millions of people, and being seen was the last thing Marcus Thompson wanted right now. The game started like any other episode of Family Feud. The Thompson family, wearing matching blue shirts, faced off against the Rivera family from Houston, Texas, who wore bright red. Steve Harvey greeted both families with his usual charm, shaking hands, cracking jokes about their outfits, and getting the audience warmed up. The energy in the studio was electric. The lights were bright. The music was pumping. It felt like a regular Tuesday taping. But from the very beginning, anyone paying close attention would have noticed that something was slightly off about Marcus Thompson. While the rest of his family was animated and excited, waving at the cameras and bouncing on their toes, Marcus stood stiff at his podium. His smile was there, but it did not reach his eyes. He kept tugging at his collar like his tie was strangling him, even though it was loosely knotted. Denise noticed and squeezed his hand lovingly. She leaned in and whispered something to him that the microphones barely picked up. "Relax, baby. This is supposed to be fun. We are on TV." Marcus nodded and forced a bigger smile, but the tension in his jaw never eased. His eyes kept darting to the cameras like they were pointed weapons. The first few rounds went smoothly enough. The Thompsons were actually doing well, winning the first 2 rounds with solid, crowd-pleasing answers. Denise was a complete natural on camera. She was funny, quick on her feet, and had this infectious energy that made the audience love her instantly. She high-fived her sister Tamika after every good answer and pointed at the camera like she was performing for everyone back home in Atlanta. Steve Harvey was clearly enjoying her personality too, laughing at her reactions, feeding off her enthusiasm, and calling her the MVP of the family. Then came the question that changed absolutely everything. Steve Harvey read from his card with a grin on his face. It was a simple, classic Family Feud question, the kind designed to get funny and slightly embarrassing answers. Name something a husband might hide from his wife. The studio audience laughed in anticipation. This was the kind of question that always produced gold on this show. Denise buzzed in first, faster than anyone on the Rivera side. She grinned at the camera, put her hand on her hip, and said confidently, "His real bank account balance." The audience roared with laughter. Steve doubled over, slapping the podium. "That is a good one," he said, shaking his head. It was the number 2 answer on the board. The Thompson family celebrated. But then it was Marcus's turn to offer an answer. Steve looked at him and repeated the question casually. "Marcus, name something a husband might hide from his wife." And Marcus froze. The smile vanished from his face like someone had flipped a switch. His mouth opened, but nothing came out for what felt like an eternity. 3 seconds. 5 seconds. The audience went quiet. The laughter drained from the room. Steve tilted his head slightly, sensing that something was off. "Marcus, you okay, brother?" Steve asked, and his voice shifted noticeably from playful game show host to something more concerned, more human. Marcus swallowed hard. He looked at Denise. He looked at the camera. He looked down at the podium. Then he looked back at Steve, and in a voice so quiet that the boom microphone operator had to lean in to catch it, Marcus said 2 words. "His job." Steve's eyebrows went up immediately. "His job," he repeated slowly, making sure the audience and the cameras caught it clearly. The board lit up. Number 1 answer. The audience cheered and clapped, but Marcus did not celebrate. He did not pump his fist or high-five anyone. He stood there like a man who had just accidentally confessed to a crime on live television. Denise laughed it off at first, the way you do when you do not yet realize that a joke is not actually a joke. She nudged Marcus playfully with her elbow. "His job. Boy, what kind of husbands do you know?" she teased, getting another laugh from the crowd. But Steve Harvey was watching Marcus closely. Steve had been hosting this show for years. More importantly, he had spent decades talking to people, counseling couples, writing books about relationships and communication. He had a sixth sense for when something real was happening beneath the surface of a conversation. And something about the way Marcus said those 2 small words, the way his voice trembled, the way he could not make eye contact with his wife, told Steve that this was not just a clever game show answer. This was a confession hiding in plain sight. The game continued through the next rounds, but Steve kept circling back to Marcus in small ways. He did it casually, the way a skilled interviewer does, slipping in questions that seemed lighthearted but were actually digging deeper. During a pause between rounds, Steve strolled over to the Thompson side and said, So Marcus, tell me about yourself. What do you do for a living, man? Marcus straightened up like a soldier at inspection. I am a regional sales manager for a medical supply company, he said. The words came out rehearsed and mechanical, like a line he had practiced in the mirror 1,000 times. Denise nodded proudly beside him. He works so hard, she added warmly, rubbing his arm. Always on the road, always making calls, always stressed about hitting his numbers. I tell him all the time that he needs to slow down, but he says providing for his family is what a real man does. Steve nodded slowly, but his eyes never left Marcus. There was a pause that lasted just a beat too long. The kind of pause that made the studio audience shift uncomfortably in their seats because they could feel something building beneath the surface, something heavy and unspoken. Steve said, "That is a good man right there," and moved on, but the seed had been planted, and it was growing fast. The tension in Marcus continued to build visibly as the game progressed. He was sweating through his dress shirt. His answers became shorter and more distracted. He gave a wrong answer in the 4th round that cost them a steal opportunity, and he barely seemed to notice. At one point, his oldest daughter, 12-year-old Kayla, looked up at him from the family lineup with wide, worried eyes and said, "Daddy, are you okay?" Loud enough for the microphones and the whole studio to hear. Marcus patted her head gently and said he was fine, just a little hot under the lights. But he was not fine. Anyone with eyes could see that Marcus Thompson was falling apart in slow motion in front of millions of people. Then came fast money. Despite Marcus's struggles, the Thompsons had won the main game, and Denise and Marcus were selected to play the final round together for the big prize. Denise went first and she was magnificent. She rattled off answers with confidence and speed, scoring 156 points. The family was jumping up and down, hugging each other behind the partition. They only needed 44 more points from Marcus to win the $20,000 grand prize. For most contestants, this would be an exciting, nerve-wracking moment. For Marcus, it looked like torture. When Marcus stepped up to the fast money podium for his turn, he looked like a man walking to the edge of a very high cliff and trying to decide whether to jump. Steve set up the round with the usual explanation of the rules, but before he asked the first question, he paused. The studio music faded. Steve looked at Marcus with an expression that the audience had rarely seen from the famously funny television host. It was not a comedic look. It was not a setup for a punchline. It was dead serious. It was direct. It was the look of an older man who had made his own share of mistakes in life and had learned hard lessons from every single one of them. "Marcus," Steve said, his voice low, steady, and unmistakably sincere. "Before we do this, I want to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me. Not as a game show host, not as someone on television, but as a man who has been where you are and lived to tell about it." The studio went dead silent. Not a cough, not a whisper, not even the shuffle of a producer's shoes behind the cameras. "Is there something you need to say to your wife?" The question hung in the air like smoke after a fire. Marcus gripped the sides of the podium so tightly that his knuckles went white. Denise's smile faded slowly as she watched her husband from across the stage, her expression shifting from excitement to confusion to fear. The audience held its collective breath, and Marcus Thompson, the man who had kept a devastating secret for over 2 years, the man who had put on a shirt and tie every morning and driven to a library to pretend he still had a career, broke down completely. Right there at the fast money podium, in front of the cameras, in front of his wife and children, in front of millions of future viewers, he dropped his head into his hands and started to cry. "Denise," Marcus said through heavy tears, his voice cracking like old wood under too much weight. "I have not been honest with you. I have not been honest with you for a long time." Denise's hand went straight to her chest. She took a step forward from the family area but then stopped, frozen in place, as if she was physically afraid to hear what was about to come out of her husband's mouth. Behind her, their 3 children stood motionless, their young faces filled with confusion and worry. Marcus wiped his face roughly with the back of his hand and forced himself to look directly at his wife. "I lost my job 2 years ago, Denise. They let me go during a company restructuring. I was not the only one, but that did not make it hurt any less, and I did not know how to tell you. You were so proud of me. The kids were so proud of me. Every time Kayla told her friends that her daddy was a big sales manager, my heart broke a little more. I could not stand the thought of seeing that pride disappear from your eyes, so I kept it to myself. The studio was so quiet you could hear the soft hum of the overhead lighting rigs and the faint whir of the cameras as they slowly zoomed in on Marcus's face. Nobody was moving. Nobody was checking their phones. Every single person in that room was locked into this moment. Marcus continued, his voice shaking but getting stronger with each sentence, as if the act of telling the truth was physically lifting a weight off his body. So I pretended. Every single morning for 2 years I put on my shirt and tie. I kissed you goodbye at the front door. And I drove to the public library on Peachtree Street. I sat there all day on my laptop applying for jobs. Hundreds of applications, Denise. Hundreds of rejections. Nobody wanted me. I started to think something was wrong with me, like I was broken or something. He paused to catch his breath. I picked up side work to keep money coming in so you would not notice. I drove for a rideshare service. I did grocery deliveries. I picked up shifts loading trucks at a warehouse on the weekends when I told you I was visiting clients. Anything I could find to keep the bills paid so our life would look normal. Then Marcus said the part that broke the audience wide open. That bonus check I brought home at Christmas. The one that fixed the roof over Kayla's bedroom. That was not from any company. I sold my father's gold watch. The one he gave me the day I got married. The one thing I had left of him. Marcus's father had passed away 6 years earlier, and that watch had been his most treasured possession. He had sold it at a pawn shop for $1,800 and brought the money home as a Christmas bonus, smiling through the pain while his children opened presents under the tree. Denise's face cycled through a dozen emotions in the span of a few seconds. Shock, confusion, hurt, anger, betrayal, and then slowly something else emerged, something that caught everyone in the studio completely off guard. Her eyes softened. They filled with tears, not tears of rage but tears of heartbreak. Not because her husband had lost his job, not because he had been driving strangers around town for tips, but because the man she loved had been suffering alone for 2 full years, carrying an impossible burden on his shoulders, and he had not trusted her enough to share it. Steve Harvey stood between them on the stage, and in that moment he was not a television personality. He was not playing a character. He was a man who had been bankrupt, a man who had slept in his car, a man who had rebuilt his life from nothing and understood exactly what shame and pride could do to a person. He turned to Marcus first. Marcus, I am going to tell you something, and I need you to hear me with your whole heart. What you did was wrong. Lying to your wife for 2 years was wrong. There is no way around it, and I am not going to sugarcoat it for you. You took away her right to be your partner. Marriage is not about one person carrying all the weight alone. It is about carrying the load together, even when the load is ugly and heavy and embarrassing. Marcus nodded, tears still running down his face. But Steve was not finished. But I also want to say this, and the men in this room need to hear it too. The reason you lied was not because you are a bad man. You lied because you were terrified. Afraid of losing the respect of the woman you love. Afraid of your children looking at you differently. Afraid of failing the people who depend on you. That fear, I understand it. Every man in this building understands it. But fear is a terrible advisor, Marcus. It told you to hide, and hiding nearly cost you the most important thing in your life. Then Steve turned to Denise, who was standing with tears streaming down her cheeks, her hands clasped together in front of her chest. Denise, I know you are hurting right now, and you have every right to be angry. Nobody would blame you for that. But before you let that anger take the wheel, I want you to really see something. Look at your husband right now. That man got up every single morning for 730 days, put on a pressed shirt and a tie, and went out into the world to fight for his family. He fought the wrong way, yes. He should have told you, but the love behind what he did, that is real, Denise. That does not go away because he made a mistake. That kind of love just needs to learn how to tell the truth. Denise was crying openly now. She did not say a word. She simply walked across the stage, past Steve Harvey, past the cameras, past the podium, past everything, and she wrapped her arms around her husband. She grabbed him and held him so tightly that the microphones picked up the sound of her hands gripping the fabric of his jacket. She buried her face into his chest, and she held on like she was never going to let go. Marcus's arms came up slowly, almost in disbelief, and he held her back. They stood there, two people in the middle of a game show stage, holding each other while the truth settled around them like dust after an earthquake. The audience erupted. Not in applause for a correct answer, not for a big win or a funny moment, but in the kind of raw, unscripted, emotional release that happens when hundreds of people witness something deeply and unmistakably real. People were standing, crying, holding the hand of the stranger sitting next to them. Steve Harvey himself had to take a step back. He pulled out a handkerchief from his suit pocket, wiped his eyes, and took a long, deep breath. "This," Steve said, pointing at Marcus and Denise still holding each other, "this right here is what marriage is actually supposed to look like. Not perfection. Not having all the answers. Not pretending everything is fine when your world is falling apart. But choosing each other even when the truth is ugly. Especially when the truth is ugly. That is the real deal." They still had fast money to finish. Steve Harvey, in a moment of grace and humanity that only he could pull off, gently brought the mood back just enough to guide Marcus through his 5 questions. Marcus stumbled through his answers, still shaking, still wiping his eyes between questions, still raw and exposed from what had just happened. But somehow, when the points were tallied up, the Thompson family had done it. They had reached 200 points. The 20,000 was theirs. The family rushed the stage in a wave of hugs and happy tears. But the money was almost beside the point by then. What had happened on that stage was worth more than any prize check. Marcus had finally told the truth after 2 years of hiding, and his wife had chosen love over anger, forgiveness over fury. Their children had watched their parents face the single hardest moment of their marriage and come through the other side still holding hands. That was a lesson no classroom could teach and no amount of money could ever buy. Steve Harvey made one more move before the cameras stopped rolling. He called Marcus and Denise back to the center of the stage. "I want to help," Steve said simply, with no fanfare and no dramatic build-up. He explained that his production company had relationships with organizations that specialized in helping people through career transitions. He promised to personally connect Marcus with job placement services, resume professionals, and networking opportunities. "You have skills, Marcus. You have determination and work ethic. I have watched you answer questions under more pressure than most people face in a lifetime. What you do not have right now is a network. And that is something I can give you." When the episode aired 6 weeks later, the response was immediate and overwhelming. The clip of Marcus's tearful confession and Denise's wordless embrace went viral within hours of airing. It was shared millions of times across every social media platform. News outlets covered it. Talk shows discussed it. People called it the most real and emotionally powerful moment in the entire history of Family Feud. The comments section under the clip filled with thousands of messages. Men wrote in saying they were going through the exact same thing, hiding job losses from their families out of shame and fear. Women wrote saying that Denise's response had taught them something profound about grace, partnership, and what it really means to stand by someone. Therapists and marriage counselors across the country began sharing the clip in sessions as a real-world example of what vulnerability and forgiveness could look like. But the most important development happened quietly, away from the cameras and the viral fame. 3 weeks after the episode's taping, Marcus received a phone call from a hiring manager at a logistics company based in Atlanta. The man had seen the Family Feud episode and told Marcus something that made him pull over to the side of the road. "I watched you stand up in front of millions of people and tell the truth when it would have been easier to keep lying. That told me more about your character than any resume ever could. That is the kind of man I want working for me." Marcus was offered a position as a regional sales consultant with a starting salary that was actually higher than what he had been making before he was let go. He accepted the job and called Denise from the parking lot after the interview, crying once again, but this time they were tears of pure, unfiltered relief. Marcus and Denise went to marriage counseling together. They did not pretend that everything was magically fixed just because the moment on television had been powerful and beautiful. They understood that trust, once broken, takes real work to rebuild. So they did the work. They showed up for each other week after week. There were difficult conversations. There were setbacks and tears and nights where Denise admitted she was still angry. But there were also breakthroughs, moments of reconnection, laughter that came easier as the months went on. They stayed committed to each other and to the process, just like they had silently promised on that game show stage. Steve Harvey checked in with the Thompson family periodically over the months that followed. When he learned that Marcus had landed the new position, Steve called him personally to congratulate him. During that conversation, Steve told Marcus something that stuck with him permanently. "You spent 2 years pretending to be something you were not. Now you get to spend the rest of your life being exactly who you are. That is freedom, brother. Real freedom. Do not ever waste it by hiding again." The Thompson family was invited back to Family Feud 8 months later for a special follow-up segment. This time, when Marcus walked onto that stage, everything about him was different. He stood tall. His shoulders were back. His smile reached his eyes. Denise held his hand and beamed beside him. When Steve Harvey asked them how they were doing, Marcus spoke clearly and without hesitation. "We are stronger than we have ever been. The worst moment of my life, standing at that podium and telling the truth, turned out to be the single best thing that ever happened to our family. I got my wife back. I got myself back. And my kids got to see that their father is not perfect, but he is honest." Their daughter Kayla, the same 12-year-old girl who had looked up at her daddy with worried eyes and asked if he was okay during that first taping, went on to write a school essay about what she had learned that day. The essay was titled, "The Day My Dad Told the Truth," and it won a regional writing competition. In it, she wrote that she used to think being strong meant never showing weakness and never letting anyone see you struggle, but watching her father break down and cry on national television, and then watching her mother walk across that stage and hold him instead of walking away, taught her that real strength has nothing to do with being tough. Real strength, Kayla wrote, is about being honest even when it is the scariest thing in the world. Steve Harvey later said in an interview that the Marcus and Denise moment ranked among the top 5 most impactful moments in all his years of hosting Family Feud. That man stood at a podium in front of cameras and millions of viewers and told a truth that could have ended his marriage, Steve said. And that woman looked at him, saw all of it, the lies, the fear, the shame, and she chose love anyway. If that does not give you hope for marriage, for family, for the basic goodness of people, then I honestly do not know what will. The ripple effects of that episode continued long after it faded from trending topics. Marcus began speaking at men's groups and churches across Georgia about the dangers of carrying your burdens alone. He would stand in front of rooms full of men and say, "I almost lost everything, my wife, my family, my self-respect, because I was too proud and too scared to say 3 simple words: I need help. Do not make my mistake. Your family does not need you to be perfect. They need you to be present, and they need you to be honest. That is enough." Denise started a support group for spouses navigating unexpected financial hardships and career disruptions. She would share her full story, including the anger she felt, the sense of betrayal, and the long road back to trust. "I chose love that day on the stage because something in my heart told me to," she would say. But the real choice was not made in that one moment. The real choice happened every single day in the months after, when I had to decide again and again to keep choosing love even when I was still hurt and still angry. That is what marriage actually is. It is not one big romantic gesture. It is a daily decision to stay. The Thompson family's story became a powerful reminder that Family Feud was more than just a game show with funny answers and viral reactions. It was a stage where real families brought their real lives, their real struggles, and their real love. And sometimes, under those bright studio lights, the truth came out in ways that nobody expected, least of all the people standing at the podiums. For Marcus and Denise Thompson, those few raw minutes on stage saved their marriage, transformed their lives, and showed millions of viewers around the world that vulnerability is not a weakness. It is the single bravest thing a person can do. If this story touched your heart, do us a favor right now and hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss another story like this one. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that it is never too late to tell the truth, and it is never too late to choose love over pride. Drop a comment below and tell us what you would have done if you were in Denise's shoes. We read every single comment and we love hearing from you. Until next time, remember that the strongest families are not the ones without problems. They are the ones brave enough to face their problems together, out in the open, with honesty and grace.